one thing I'd love for you to do for our listeners is maybe explain a little bit about past life regressions and some of the experiences that you've had, or what people can expect in a way from doing
Mhm.
it. Because I know a lot of people have heard of past life regression, but that's about as far as it's got, is just
Right.
hearing about it. But it'd be lovely if you can just dig a little bit more into what that modality is and how does it work and what has come out, maybe some examples of what you've helped people experience,
Yeah.
just to help you know us and our listeners to get more of a feel for it and an idea for it,
Yeah.
because it is really popular at the moment.
Yeah. And I think we live in a wonderful time because we have access to this information. I think, before of, the year 2000, really, I know the internet was getting going around 96, 97, but it would like take 12 hours to download a picture. And it was really just kind of forums and people writing to each other. Before that, it was almost a magical experience of like walking down the street and seeing a flyer in a bookstore window or taped to or nailed to a electrical post or a lamp post or something, and or flyer in the coffee shop, and it was like, oh, Zen meditation class on Tuesdays. And then you go to a class, and then somebody speaks of something else or a book or something, and it's just kind of this more organic way of opening up to this information. Whereas now, yeah, you just get this fire hose of you type in past life regression into Google, and you get whatever 5.2 million hits or something. And so before it was just like, oh, you're hanging out in the used bookstore, and you just happen to walk down the aisle, and there's a display of just books and there's something that catches your eye. Well, in terms of how this really works, is all we're doing is accessing a memory. So it's not like with in past life regression, you actually time travel and you're going to get stuck back in this past life and not be able to return to this present reality. All you're doing is accessing a memory. Not unlike if I was to ask somebody, well, hey, what happened at that meeting at work last Wednesday? And I was like, oh yeah, well the accountant came in, they were talking about the fourth quarter results, and you have a memory. You're not back in the meeting. You're just having a memory of the meeting or lunch with your friend last Saturday, or hey, tell me about high school and tell me about what was going on. Did you play sports? Were you doing music? Were you doing theater? Were you smoking cigarettes behind the gym? Tell me about what was going on in high school. It's not that you go back to high school and get stuck in high school as a 18-year-old or 16-year-old or something. No, you're just having a memory. Maybe it might even ask you about your earliest childhood memory. Maybe some people go all the way back to when they're 5 or even 2 years old or earlier. All we're going to do is go a bit further. And so it's sort of like we're swimming in the shallow end of the pool. And I'm asking about lunch last week. I'm asking about that meeting at work last month. I'm asking about high school. I'm asking about your earliest memory. We're swimming in the shallow end of the pool. All we're going to do is go into the deep end of the pool. It's the same pool. It's just now you're going to access memory. And this is where it gets really interesting. Is who, oh, excuse me, it's like accessing this memory with all the research that's been going on over the last years, if not decades, is that this consciousness of ours, kind of what makes us aware of us and the world around us, consciousness may be non-local. A lot of the research seems to indicate that consciousness is not housed within this skull, within the brain, but it's non-local. And that's where you get a lot of this research around ESP, psychics, and remote viewing. Now, not all of it proves that psychics are real. There's some proves that some aren't real. And there's people out there who do fake it and are trying to scam people. But there is enough evidence to show that something is going on, especially around the remote viewing. A big chapter in my book about remote viewing. And back in the early 70s, the United States government was very concerned, specifically the CIA, was concerned that the Russians were doing a lot of research around ESP and psychics for psychic warfare. They wanted to see into the Pentagon. They wanted to see into military bases and see the reports and the maps and who's running the show. And so they were looking for some people who could help with their side of the research. They found some people at Stanford in California. But this is a kind of a long story. Tons of books out there about all this as well. And what they found is there was some talented people who had the ability to take their consciousness and look at different locations around the earth. And one of the first things they ever did was accidentally remote view, take their consciousness to an underground bunker. And I say they accidentally did this because what they were supposed to be remote viewing was somebody's summer cabin. But the summer cabin was so small compared to this huge underground bunker that they all just kind of, well, okay, well, we're supposed to look at the underground bunker. And to the point where they were seeing names of top secret files on desks and the name tags of people who worked there. And there was a National Security Administration's uh, facility that was spying on Russian satellites or something. And they got very upset at the CIA. The CIA got upset at them. And so there was this big kerfuffle because the information they were getting was accurate. So they did a lot of this research over decades. And they claimed to have shut it down in the early 1990s because it came out and they got embarrassed and there's some Freedom of Information Act stuff that came out. And they say they shut it down mainly out of embarrassment that they were doing this kind of research. But if it was working and they spent 20 years and millions of dollars, they were getting results that they liked. And so I'm guessing they're still doing it. And what was fascinating about it, though, they not only could look across the country, they could look across the world. So move their consciousness non-local, meaning not housed here, but they could move it somewhere else. They could also move it forward and backwards in time. And so now we're getting government-sponsored research showing that consciousness is non-local, as well as all the other research coming out, like Michael Newton. He passed away in 2011, but he was a psychotherapist in 1969, accidentally regressed somebody back into the spirit world. And he was a psychotherapist. He wanted to help somebody with some issues around anxiety and anger and things. He thought regressing back to childhood would be a good idea. So using some hypnotherapy, he regressed them back to childhood. But the guy kept going. He went past childhood, past being a newborn, past being in utero, and he went back to being a soul, a spirit world before having a body here on earth, what Michael Newton ended up calling life between lives. And he healed. He healed the issues he needed to heal. And this, of course, fascinated Michael Newton. And he was wondering, can other people heal like this? Can other people even access this state of whatever it is, state of consciousness? And so he started working with people and seeing if he could get people to this soul state. And over the course of the 1970s, as he's working with people, he realizes people are having similar experiences. Now, this is 1970s, of course, no internet, no cell phones. These people can't connect with each other. They don't know who each other is. They can't find each other. They're from different parts of the country, different ages, different backgrounds, different cultures. And yet they're having similar experiences of being back in this soul state, having memories of being back as a soul. And so he does more and more research. So he basically does about 20 years worth of research working with thousands of people. 365 days a year. He's over 20 years. He's working with thousands of people. And in 1992, he releases his first book, Journey of Souls. Then he does another decade's worth of research, another 1,000 people or so, releases his second book, Destiny of Soul, basically detailing people's experiences multiple people have these similar experiences. And he details what they experience in soul world. And they're still doing research. He started the Michael Newton Foundation, or Institute, Michael Newton Institute, and they still do trainings. They just released a book a couple of years ago of new research. This is like 60 years of research they've been doing, let alone, Brian Weiss, his extraordinary book, Many Lives, Many Masters. He, he was also a psychiatrist, and he is a left brain analytical academic. That's his definition of who he is. Still alive. He's 83. I just did a training with him last summer. And in 1980, he was working with a patient. Now, at this point, he has his bachelor's degree in chemistry from Columbia. He has his medical degree from Yale. So he's a doctor. He then turns to psychiatry, and he's head of Mount Sinai Psychiatric in Miami, Florida. He's working with somebody for a year with her extraordinary anxiety and panic. And he can't find a way to help her with this until finally he also thinks, okay, well, if we do some regression work using hypnotherapy, same situation. He thinks he's going to regress her back to childhood, deal with some issues. She keeps going. But instead of soul world, she goes to a past life. And I believe, if I remember the book correctly, she goes to like a time back in Egypt. And he thinks with the healing that she accomplishes by having this past life, that's just a construct of the subconscious mind. Subconscious mind speaks in symbolism and metaphor and storytelling allegory. Carl Jung said that, Sigmund Freud said that, Milton Erickson, Laura Pearls, all these people. And so he's thinking, with all his expertise, as smart as he is, he's like, okay, well, this is something the subconscious mind is creating to create the healing. Well, they do some more past life regression back to this period that she experienced. She creates more and more healing, but she's also getting verifiable information of a detail that she should not be able to access. So this is 1980. There's no internet, and there's probably not a whole lot of detailed academic books that are available to the common person. Basically, you kind of have to be a PhD of a archaeologist or Egyptologist to really understand and know this information. But she's gaining verifiable information and also verifiable information about Brian Weiss's life. Things like he had a child pass away really early, like 1 years old or something. 1980, nobody should know this. There was no obituary. It was a very private family matter that only a handful of people knew. And she's giving detailed information about that and some other things that finally this left brain analytical academic finally had to say the only way she could create this kind of deep emotional healing and resolve the issues that for a year he was trying to help her deal with and get the information about his own life that was unknown to pretty much everybody is that she was accessing this through a non-local consciousness, through past life regression and other means of finding out information about his life. And so he eventually, in 1988, released Many Lives, Many Masters, and that pretty much kind of started the modern day past life regression movement. Michael Noon's book came out in 1992. Of course, there have been books by Dolores Cannon and others before that. But because that book was so popular, Oprah liked it, has had him on the show a bunch of times in the 90s and stuff. So other things like 60 Minutes and other big programs were having Brian Weiss on because he didn't look like the woo-woo person. You know, he was an academic who could speak in more common language what the experience was. And there's this quote by William James, who's one of the kind of pioneers of modern psychotherapy. And he said, to prove that all crows are not black, you only need one white crow. And here's the thing, to prove that consciousness is non-local and we have the ability to move forward and backwards in time because time is non-linear, and there you go with Einstein and Niels Bohr and all that, and that people can access past life regression. You only need one white crow. Well, since then, I mean, there you have it. Many lives, many masters, let alone Journey of Souls, let alone all the other experiences that have been written about over time. And let alone the government research of decades into remote viewing and consciousness being non-local, let alone the theories that this is a computer simulation, that it's a holographic universe, that's the multiverse. I think eventually, and again, that's kind of what my book's all about, is the science, the history, where this is coming from. So by the end of the book, he's like, you have to come to the conclusion that this is really happening, that we have the ability to access these past life memories, that the brain does not hold on to information, but that it's a receiver and transmitter, like a big antenna, like a big radar dish. And one aspect of the brain that people have been looking at over the last decade or so is the pineal gland. And this is a tiny piece of the brain. Let's say if there was like a golf ball in the middle of your brain, it's kind of at the back of the golf ball. It's about the size of a grain of rice. Its main job is melatonin production. So that's a hormone that puts us to sleep as the sun goes down. It kind of turns off, then cortisol levels go up as the sun comes up and we wake up. Well, what research found just some years ago, wasn't that long ago, is that the pineal gland, this little, tiny little rice-size pea shape or pea-size part of the brain, it contains tens of thousands of microscopic crystals. And you can look this up online, look it up on Google, and look up on Google Images, pineal gland crystals. And depending on how old you are, because the crystals grow, so somebody in middle age probably has somewhere around 30 to 40,000 little tiny crystals in their pineal gland. There's no evolutionary need for them to be there. They have nothing to do with melatonin production, but these are crystals when pressure is applied create electromagnetic effect. So crystals conduct electricity. That's why they're in our watches and our computers and phones and all the kind of like electric gear. Crystals, when mechanical pressure is applied, can conduct electricity, create electromagnetic field. That's what's happening in our brain. A measurable electromagnetic field can be created. And a lot of people are pointing to with research papers, again, you can look up on Google, research that implies that the crystals within the pineal gland itself maybe, is creating a transducer effect. And a transducer, at least back in the day, I don't know how it works nowadays with the streaming and the internet and all this stuff with TV, but back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s and before, if you wanted to watch your TV show, and here in America, the big TV show was Cheers or something like that. If I wanted to watch Cheers on Thursday at 9 p.m., I had to turn on my TV, turn it to the right channel. And at that time, a TV station or TV studio in Los Angeles had this big cassette tape and they put it into their equipment. That equipment turned that image and sound off that magnetic tape into a frequency, shot it in their radar dish up into the airwaves. And now, back then, and even now, there's all these radio stations, there's all these TV stations, there's these microwaves, there's all this stuff. Now we have cell towers, now we have Wi-Fi. Back then, just like turning a radio, when you turn on your radio, you don't get 50 radio stations all at once. You tune it to the right station to finally you get a signal that you're pulling in through that antenna on your car, and you get to hear either the talk radio or the music or the sports or whatever you're listening to. TV is the same way. You turn it to the right channel, channel 10 at 9 p.m. on Thursday. The little rabbit ears on your TV or the big antenna on your house starts vibrating microscopically to attract and pull in that one frequency, not the radio signals, not the other TV stations, not the microwaves, just or the radar waves. If you're near an airport, the control tower, you're pulling in that one TV station through the antenna into the transducer in your TV, and that transducer turns that frequency back into image and sound, and you get to watch your TV show. That's what some research papers are indicating that that's what the pineal gland is doing. It's pulling in frequencies or information and turning it back into image and sound. And so then there's theories of like, well, where's this information coming from? And it's like, well, that's that kind of uh, you know, the field, the 0 point field, that energy field that binds the universe together, that creates the world, the force as in Star Wars. All information is held there, sort of like the Akashic records. And you're able, by tuning in, by maybe focusing your awareness and your attention on, go back to the past life that is the karmic cause of all this anxiety I've been feeling over the last 30 years, that after years and years of talk therapy has no resolution. Go back to the past life that is most influencing your current life, whatever the phrase is. You're turning the channel to the TV, you're finding the right book in the library of your lives, and then you get to explore that life. Again, it's a memory. Just like if I was to ask you to close your eyes, just relax in your chair and tell me about high school. Tell me about an episode. What was your favorite class? Okay, well, now you have a specific focus, not on what was your favorite sport you like to play or what was your favorite band in high school, you listened to in high school. No, it's your favorite class. So now you're focused on a memory that you will pull up. So that's sort of what past life regression is all about. Kind of a little bit of the biology, tiny little bit of the history, uh, a little bit about the research that even the US government and probably other governments have been doing for the last 50, 60 years, if not longer. And we all have the ability to do this. I've met people, they come when they want to do this work, they're excited about it, they're hopeful about it, but then they also say, I can't be hypnotized, or I can't, I've tried it in the past and it didn't work. And it's like, well, it's not really a thing because it's a biology. The biology of this work is moving the brain from the beta brainwave state down to the alpha brainwave state, and even in some kind of situations and therapy down to the theta brainwave state. Again, the biology of it is just how fast your brain is operating. So if you've seen those YouTube videos of the electrical storm in the brain when you're walking down the street or you're thinking a thought or shaking somebody's hand or something, this electrical storm goes off. Well, how fast that electrical storm fires determines what brainwave state you're in. It's just a natural process. And if you're in the more conscious awareness of the present moment, having a conversation with somebody, maybe at work, focusing on a specific project that needs to be done, you're in the beta brainwave state. You're firing about 18, 20 cycles per second. One wave goes from the back to the front to the back again. That's one wave. 18, 20 of those per second puts you in the beta brainwave state. But when you get bored at work, there's that meeting that's going on and on. There's a networking event where somebody's just babbling at you about something that's so uninteresting. The TV show your partner wants to watch, but it's boring to you. Back in school, and that class that was boring, you just start staring out the window and you move to that daydreamy state of, you're thinking about the future, the weekend's coming up and how much fun you're going to have, or that vacation you took a year ago. Moving to the future, moving to the past, you now slowed down your brainwave state. Now you're firing about 12 cycles per second. Now you're in the alpha brainwave state. Maybe you start to fall asleep. You're not really asleep, not really awake. You're firing about 6 cycles per second in the theta brainwave state. That's the kind of thing where somebody really has to, hey, pay attention. This is going to be on the final exam. You need to understand this. Or maybe even fall asleep, firing in the delta brainwave state of 1.5 cycle per second. So, and then, if somebody falls asleep in class, hey, Craig, why don't you come up here and do the problem on the board? Now I'm back awake, firing at 30 cycles per second because now I'm stressed. And now I'm hyper aroused because everybody's laughing at me and I don't know how to do the problem because I wasn't paying attention. Well, you just altered your state of consciousness 3 or 4 times at work or watching that movie or back in school. It's a natural process. You move down to that daydreamy, bored state of the imagination. And the biology is literally just how fast your brain is operating. What we do in hypnotherapy is take advantage of that. And that's the whole thing of the trope, the stereotype of the watch, the pocket watch, you're getting sleepy. It's just like the teacher at school being boring or the person at work during the meeting. It's just like, yeah, you're starting to do this because you're kind of being bored, so you want to get sleepy. We don't actually do that. It's a bit of a stereotype that we see in movies and TVs and things to be entertaining, but we do want to move down to that alpha brainwave state. This is kind of the opposite of meditation. People have done any sort of meditation, maybe like the Zen meditation or transcendental meditation. The point of that style of meditation is to keep your awareness in the present moment because it's so hard to do. And there's lots of research, of course, showing the health benefits and mental health benefits, emotional health benefits of that, spiritual health. But returning your awareness to this present moment again and again and again. Why? Because it keeps floating away, drifting off the monkey mind. And so you sit or stand, or maybe you're doing walking meditation or something, but you return to the breath again. And then you return to the breath again. And that's the whole point of meditation. Just keep returning to this present moment and you train yourself to be in a more peaceful and calm state of mind and body. Well, we want the opposite of that. We want your mind to drift away. And we want you to do that on purpose and for the sake of creating healing. And so even though the feeling may be similar to that of meditation, the what we want the brain to do is very, very different. And even though in meditation the brain looks like it's kind of moving into alpha or maybe in those higher states of gamma, and that's a whole and there's another rabbit hole. Um, uh, what we want to do is use that imaginative state that we're all capable of doing. So if you can imagine, even if you're in a crowded airport at a crowded gate with fluorescent lights and it's bright and it's noisy. If your brain can drift away to like being on the beach, even though you're in a crowded airport, you just hypnotize yourself. That's self-hypnosis. And so it's not that you can't do it. You can. You just may have been working with somebody you didn't feel comfortable with, or maybe they didn't know what they were doing and didn't know how to help you specifically to get into that state to make you feel more relaxed. And that's where here's a whole nother pathway where training becomes really important with this kind, whether it's hypnotherapy in and of itself or whether it's a more spiritual side of this, a past life regression. Make sure the person knows what they're doing because a lot of people get trained with just a handful of hours of video training, and they don't know how to help somebody if they run into a big issue. That happened. I want to talk about that in the book, the Past Lives Guidebook, about when I was being trained. The teacher, kind of before class started, we were just chit-chatting, and he said when he was getting going, uh, doing hypnotherapy and past life regression, that must have been the late 80s, early 90s, was he told his friends, "Hey, I'm doing hypnotherapy. I'm going to do past life regression. Isn't this interesting?" And his friends, "Oh yeah, my ex-wife did past life regression, and she went up just to have an experience, have fun. Read the Brian Weiss book, was very interested, very curious, as it's a great way to come to this work. Just wanted to have an experience of some of her past lives. So she went to go see somebody, and this past life, excuse me, excuse me, this past life she experienced was back in the Middle Ages, medieval times." But she was kind of leader of the Rebel Alliance, and she was kind of stirring up the community to go against the authority figures. Of course, they did not like that, and they wanted to make an example of her, so they arrested her and they threw her in jail and tortured her and starved her to death, which took many, many a month. And because they wanted to make an example of her, she had a loud mouth, and they wanted to shut that down. And what better way than torture her to death and make sure everybody knew what was happening? Well, she realized that the jailer, the person in charge of her torture and her starvation, was her husband in this current life. And there was no healing, there's no resolution around. It was just like, hey, here's a memory. Good luck to you. Ended the session, and a month later, they got divorced because there's no resolution, there's no healing. It literally ruined a relationship. Now I'm going to guess there's probably other issues in that relationship. But at the very least, it was the final straw that came to breaking up that relationship. And there's a divorce decree in Santa Fe County, New Mexico, here in the United States, that one of the issues is a past life regression and that he did this to me. Now, again, here's a longer conversation, another rabbit hole to go down, but they could have been playing this out for multiple lives, needing to learn to grow, figure out this relationship they're having together. And they keep failing, if you will, keep getting a D minus or an F on their learning. Because one of the things that Michael Newton found in working with tens of thousands of people, the Michael Newton Institute at this point, over 60 years, is that we're here for learning and growth. We come to this kind of flight simulator, computer simulator of a world here on planet Earth as these bodies and these human entities to learn and to grow as souls. Not unlike maybe learning mathematics, and you start at 5 years old learning about 2 + 2 = 4, and then in the next grade, as you move up, you're learning about times tables, and then long division the next year, and then fractions, and then in high school, you're learning about algebra and calculus and trigonometry, and then you're getting your master's degree at Yale or Oxford or Cambridge, and you're doing those crazy equations on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard. Well, it took multiple years. That took probably 14, 15 years from 2 + 2 = 4 to getting those crazy equations to really understand that. You just don't get dropped into your first year in school and now you understand horrendous equations that make no sense to the commoner like myself. You have to grow into that. You have to learn through multiple experiences. And if you could look at each year of school as another life, it's like, okay, well, maybe it took multiple years to um, learn about love or compassion. And just like in school, if you're taking chemistry, and you fail that class because you just don't get it and you didn't go to tutoring and you didn't study, you have to take that class over again. Or here in America, you don't do well in the seventh grade or the sixth grade or whatever, you take that grade over again. Well, what if we're not doing so well with love or compassion or don't understand? Or maybe there's various ways of learning about math, about chemistry, about love. And so okay, let's run a different scenario this time. Let's run a different play. And you learn and you grow, but maybe you have to do it through different kind of scenarios, or maybe you don't do so well one or two times. Maybe these two people that I was just talking about, they've been looping this pattern life after life after life, and this person could help them. Maybe even create resolution. So they had the greatest love relationship of all time. But instead, they just like, well, I don't know how to help. And it was like, good luck to you after that horrible experience. And that's the point of this work. Yeah, you can come to it for edification and discovery and insights and for fun. It can be just like discovering your ancestry. That can be really fun. But it also can be, you know, a little bit daunting when you realize what some of your ancestors have done to other people. And there can be a lot of hurt and pain there that you receive. It's like, okay, well, I didn't realize my family were such bastards, and hurt all these people over hundreds of years. It's like, well, now what are you going to do? Are you just going to carry that hurt and pain, that guilt, that shame with you? Or is there a way to resolve this and maybe even help, down the line? And so this work, while yes, it can be fun and it's fun to discover and learn and especially about yourself and find insights about yourself and maybe how your purpose here on this life, how it may relate to other lives you've lived, it's really about the healing and the resolution that needs to happen in order to move forward. And that's what can be so important. And you may not come into it with the intention of like, I need to heal this specific thing, or I just have this vague anxiety or anger or resentment or shame or guilt, and I don't know why. And I've spent years in talk therapy, and I read Brian Weiss's book, or I read Dolores Cannon, and this feels right. This feels familiar. I think I want to do past life regression. Or just I read Brian Weiss, that sounds fascinating. I want to learn more about who I was. But then you get to some extraordinary circumstance that needs resolution. Okay. Make sure you're working with somebody who knows how to help with that. And just because nowadays, because of the internet, you can do these, weekend trainings. There's a conference or an expo, I'm going to, and one of the pre-workshops is an hour and a half past life regression where she certifies you as a past life regression therapist in an hour and a half. And that's concerning. I had 100 hours after 400 hours of extraordinary training in hypnotherapy. Then I did another 100 hours in past life regression on top of the continuing education. That's not to pat myself on the back or that's not a flex or anything. That's showing you need to be careful of who you want to work with. You have a rapport with different kinds of people, but make sure if you get in trouble, because one of the past, like you asked me before about some past life experiences people have had. And one aspect of this is like, oh, okay, I'm going to explore life over maybe several decades. And you go to a past life, maybe in the 1700s, and you start, and there's not linear. You don't have to be in chronological order. You don't have to start at 10 years old and go to 16 and go to 30 and go to 40. I've had people start at 25, go to 12, go to 80, go back to 4. It can jump around because of the important things you want to look at. If you live to be 90 years old in that life, you can't look at every hour of that 90 years, of course. So we're going to look at 4 or 5 specific events, important events that you need to look at, maybe for healing or just to discover a specific thing you want to discover. And so it may jump around. Maybe it's chronological, but might jump around. I had one person, though, just do 3 days over the course of Normandy Beach in World War II. And it's just like that's what he needed to resolve and heal. 3 days. And that was dropping into it and then the death 3 days later. And it was intense. And I don't know where he's going to go. I don't know what book of his life he's going to pull off the shelf, so to speak. And he created great healing around the kind of anxiety and trepidation and despair and sorrow he had been feeling that had no seemingly current life explanation. I've had other people actually jump multiple lives, or maybe we'll go through the long hallway and pick different doors to view different lives. There's very different ways of doing this, depending on what you want to look at. But again, it's like accessing memories. So we can look at, I want to look at the first 2 years of high school, or the first 2 years of university, or your first year of your marriage, or I want to look at several years of your life. I want to look at childhood. I want to look at your teenage years. I want to look at your 20s. I want to look at your 30s. And so it can be like past lives too. We can look at various aspects of different lives or different parts of a life. And again, it's just pointing this consciousness, this non-local consciousness, tuning the radar dish or the antenna to the right state. And so whether it's maybe you're looking at, from 10 years old to being 80 years old and looking at 4 or 5 different important events in that life that have to do with the anger you want to resolve or the resentment or the guilt or the shame you may be experiencing that you can't seem to rectify. Maybe it's just like a short 3 days. Whatever the experience will be for you, it's again making sure that if necessary, there's healing available and resolution. I've had a handful of people even create physical healing. Now, we've been talking about here is mainly more kind of mindset issues of is life fair or unfair? Is love easy or hard? Was wealth and riches important or not important to human growth or spiritual growth? Whatever. All different aspects of maybe mindset and emotional issues, guilt or shame or anger or resentment. But there have been people who have had extraordinary physical healings. And I actually start off my book with this because I work with somebody and we can do a 90-minute session. Oftentimes people want to do a longer, more intensive session of 3.5 hours. And she did a longer session. And I always make sure, and I kind of follow the Michael Newton protocol. We do past life regression, then we move up into that soul world, that soul state. And that's where healing happens. And even if you didn't specifically have something heal, you just want to discover insight, we always go to the healing place because maybe there's something unknown that needs to be healed. And you can create healing there. Get another deep rabbit hole to go down. But one aspect of that is pulling the cords. And this is more of a hypnotherapeutic technique. But noticing if there's any cords, sort of like the plug of your blender connected to the wall. Are there any cords or plugs negatively connected to you from a past life that you know or is unknown to you? And you kind of scan your body. And I want you to take your hands and start pulling these cords out or having your soul guide help you, your soul guide, your spirit guide, or if there's other healing beings there, I want them to help you start pulling these things out if necessary. Otherwise, just pull them out yourself. I was working with this woman and she did her healing work. And while we're having a past life regression, we're having a conversation. This isn't like you go to sleep and you kind of daydreamy float around. No, I'm asking you questions, one for the recording. So you have, access to this information in the weeks, months, years later. But it's also to help guide and facilitate, especially you get up to the soul world. It's lovely there. And you may just want to sit in the jacuzzi of warmth and friendship. Well, we have places to go. We need to go to the healing place. We want to discover more about your purpose and your goals. So we need to move this on. So that's kind of the job of the past life regression therapist to help move it along or issues come up to help with that. Well, in the healing place, I give people some privacy. I give them some time. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes. And she was doing her healing work. You can see on her face and just give her some time, doing some encouraging her. And eventually you just said, okay, I'm complete and let's move on to the next part. Well, I follow up with people a couple days later to see how they're doing. How's your experience? I love hearing about this stuff. And she emailed me back and she says, 20 years of chronic hip pain are gone. And I didn't know she had hip pain. She didn't mention it. She just lives with it. She's been to the doctor. She had the MRI. She's had physical therapy. She's tried everything for 20 years and can't get rid of this hip pain. And she was in the healing place, and I asked about the cords, and she noticed a big, huge cord on her hip. And she tried to pull it out and she couldn't pull it out. And so she asked her spirit guide to come over and help. Spirit guide couldn't pull it out either. So they asked all the spirit beings that happened to be in that healing place to come over and do one of those tug of war things. And they pulled and he pulled and he pulled and finally they all pulled it out. And this is what was taking some time, the minutes and minutes of her dealing with this cord. I didn't know about it, but she was doing the healing work herself. And 3 days later, she emails me, says, I haven't had hip pain. This chronic hip pain I've had for 20 years is now gone. And I don't know that she even really understood what the cord was to or for. It's just it needed to go. And that's the power of this. And again, that's more of a rare occurrence, but certainly there's the books out there, Ian Stevenson and some of the others, where the amazing stories of kids who are having past life memories, reincarnation, and the birthmarks uh, are right in the same areas where the person got shot or stabbed or something crazy like that. And it's like, so there's these connections that we can have, either physically or maybe emotionally or maybe with mindset issues around life or love or money or something that may be creating blocks or need resolution or is just part of the learning process. Now it's time to, instead of learning as a rich person, now it's maybe time to understand what it is to be on the other side of that. It's learning, it's growth. And so, um, again, this is like, I think I keep digging the rabbit hole deeper. And I think we ended up with more questions than answers with a lot of this stuff, but it's quite powerful work. And again, if you're interested in any of this, is there somebody in your area that you're familiar with, or most of this work is done over Zoom nowadays, not just with me, but other people, not just hypnotherapy or past life regression, but talk therapy or relationship counseling or obviously podcasting. You don't have to be in a studio with each other anymore. We could talk about around the world. I'm in Arizona, Flagstaff, Arizona. You're over there in England. I'm working with somebody with past life regression from Switzerland tomorrow. And this isn't, again, not a flex or to brag, but it's like this is the power of this work. And the reason it works so well doing it over Zoom, again, whether it's talk therapy or a doctor's appointment or relationship counseling or life coaching or whatever it is, hypnotherapy, past life regression, is that people feel comfortable and relaxed in their homes. And especially with something like, whether, hypnotherapy or past life regression, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to guide and facilitate you fixing yourself and finding the information yourself. So in and of itself, it's not like a massage or physical therapy or something where I'm, hands-on massaging your shoulders or something. I'm guiding and want to see you, make sure your ecology, you're doing okay. But this can be done anywhere because you can feel relaxed and comfortable in your homes. In fact, there's some research that shows that Zoom sessions work better than in-person sessions. Again, whether it's talk therapy, relationship counseling, or hypnotherapy or something, because people feel safe in their homes. They feel relaxed. They don't have to drive across town, especially if you live in a big city and it's rush hour. And then you're done, you're still at home. You don't have to go anywhere. So, again, I think that's still more questions than answers so far, but.